Okay, so now you're just going to compliment us all over again. No,
Right. I'll throw a bunch more in. Don't worry about it.
It's funny that you say that though, because you're being so kind to say that we're just like a bunch of gals living our lives trying to do it smart, which I mean, if you saw the behind the scenes, you would see how many not smart decisions we've unfortunately made. But the whole point that we started this platform was because we just felt like health was so serious. Oh, and when we first started on TikTok 4 years ago, no one was talking about it. So it's like, we're going to be the ones that just talk about it. But now that there's 5 billion health influencers, we really have pivoted to being the ones who we don't do things perfectly. We don't want to be unachievable or unrelatable because we have a 19-step routine 5 times a day and, all we do is health. Because who wants that, right? Like, that's just not fun.
Yeah.
So we've tried to make it our mission. And, Jenna obviously has certifications and education behind what she's doing. I'm just following along and trying to figure out what the heck's going on. In fact, last night, I went to the bathroom, and this is TMI, but here we are. And of course, Jenna's my practitioner. And I literally made her look at my poop because I passed a parasite and I needed her to confirm that happened. And we didn't put it on Instagram because I have a little bit of like dignity left. Well, not the picture, just the story. But if you're lucky enough and you follow our podcast, then you hear it here. But we're like, you know what? Like, Jenna's health is in such a great place. Mine has been kind of all over the place. And which is why I personally, selfishly, really wanted to chat with you today. You talk a lot about gut issues and IBS and constipation. And I think every podcast goes into like, how did you get here? What started? But I know that you personally beat chronic illness. And I do think that it's important to share what that was and a little bit of your journey before we jump in today, because I personally just want to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up with Crohn's disease. I was diagnosed when I was 13 years old. And at that time, it was just Western medicine. My mom took me in and I got put on immunosuppressive drugs. And so it was controlled in that sense. And then I started getting sicker when I was around 19, 20. I would just have crazy body pain, had to like drop out of college for a year because my back was so bad. And no one could figure it out. It was, my imaging wasn't all too abnormal. And it was just one of those things. And then I eventually started experiencing severe constipation, was completely reliant on enemas and had a couple rectal prolapses from the difficulty behind that. Talk about TMI. And, started getting all these other weird things like tinnitus and constant allergies and it like 20 to 30 things. And I basically went on disability at age 24 and was forced to basically like figure out how to get better. I mean, there's nothing else to do. And so things weren't working out in Western medicine. I started kind of going down the rabbit hole in alternative medicine, saw a bunch of chiropractors who did muscle testing and functional medicine. And after doing that for a few years, I was like, you know what? I need to go back to school and do that, because if I'm going to heal myself, I want to have more power and get maybe to these seminars or conferences or get access to things that maybe I can't as a patient. Now it's a little different. Now everything's like free and democratized, but back then it wasn't. And so then while I was in school, I would basically use my friends as my guinea pigs and I would start getting them better. And so it really just gave me a new purpose. I originally went in to heal myself and then I just started helping other people. And I'm by no means completely done. Like I am still a work in progress. And I tell all my patients that because I think that's how people can relate to me, is that I'm in it with them. And if they learn something, I want them to tell me as well, because I am sucking all the knowledge from everyone else and just spitting it back out to anyone that I can help. And that's pretty much my role here on this earth, I feel.
I love that. Do you have any inkling as to maybe why, other than having Crohn's, that you got so sick? Is there anything about the way that you grew up or the way that you started your life that could have created some of these additional issues?
Yeah, certainly. I grew up without my dad. It was just me and my mom was super hard on me. So I think emotional and growing up with trauma is massive, massive, massive in chronic illness. I think it's even bigger than the chemical component, the toxins and everything, because there are people who are exposed to those things who are fine. Really, your emotional trauma is biochemistry that does result in physiological and epigenetic changes, which then leads to pathology and disease, or on the other side, wellness. And so I think that was a big part of it. And then, later in 2019, I found out I had chronic Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, and all these other infections. And I was like, I wonder if those immunosuppressive drugs that I'd been taking since I was 2013 left me susceptible, age 13, not 2013, left me susceptible to all these other things that maybe I otherwise wouldn't have gotten had I had a resilient immune system. So, we'll never know kind of thing. And that's also the struggle with Western medicine is you can't prove it and all these things. But my personal opinion is it's probably likely a combination of emotional and being on immunosuppressive drugs for such a long time.
Real quick, I'm so glad that you're saying that. And honestly, I want that to be a bit of a core of the conversation that we're having today, because, these days on social media, you're seeing people talk so much about toxins and what we're eating and what we're putting into our body and everything that's around. And honestly, there's a lot of fear mongering in this space. Like, even if people think they're not fear mongering, they're fear mongering. Like, sorry, they are. And I want to talk about the emotional component because it's something that Jill and I neglected for so long. Like, truly, I was so like, you need to take the supplements. You have to eat the right diet. Like, I was very stubborn. And then I started tapping more into my nervous system and stress management and looking deeper into trauma. And I was like, oh my gosh, hold up a second. And when I did that and I paid attention to everyone who was dealing with chronic illness or gut issues or whatnot, everyone had something in common. My clients, all of them had been through something either traumatic or had crazy stress levels or, was a college athlete like Jill was that put so much, pressure on themselves. So I just wanted to make that note because I think it's really important for this to lead into this conversation.
One of the things that I love about you guys is that you don't fearmonger, and that I literally enjoy watching you guys. And it's a challenge not to fearmonger. Like, I know how hard it is because you want to help people, which means that you want them to come to seek your help, which means that you want them to understand how important it is that, you come see me, but then you don't want to fearmonger. And I struggle it as well with my posts. It's like, where's that fine balance? And I think you guys do an excellent job at educating and not fearmongering. There's not too many people that do it better.
Wow.
We did pay Dr.
Did
Max
you guys
to
hear
say
all
that.
that?
Yeah. No, but you know what? Dr. Max, in December, I, for the first time ever, had, what is it called? Health anxiety. And for about a month and a half, I was convinced I was dying. Truly, because I had a lot of blood results come back that showed mold toxicity, not black mold, but just mold in general, and a lot of other things. And all of the sudden, I started paying attention to every tiny symptom I had. And it was the most miserable month and a half of my life. And I had so much anxiety and so much stress and panic attacks, truly. And I think part of it was the mold, right? And as I started to supplement and make changes in my body, then that went away a little bit. But I think the reality is a lot of it we don't know, right? Like, there's so many studies to be done and there's so many tests. And yes, it's scary of all the things that they're putting in our food and the pesticides and this and that, whatever. But what good does that do us right now by just scaring the shit out of everyone every single day? I wanted to ask you though, what do you say, and we get it all the time, what do you say to the person that says, well, yeah, I'm stressed out, but I can handle it?
I found out, and I'm still finding this out with myself, that you can't, or you'll have trouble convincing people of that. They're just gonna have to walk through the path and the suffering until they admit it to themselves. Because that's what it comes down to, is when is that point going to be so bad where you have that honest conversation with yourself? And that's what it's like in the world of suffering and in chronic illness, is that, okay, if that's the way you feel, I can't convince you until only you can convince you. And so, I have patients, where I do mostly functional medicine. I do some mind body work as well, but they are in that camp. And it's like, okay, I've given you the information. I planted that seed. It's in your brain. You heard me. Let's continue doing what we're doing. And, at some point they'll say like, okay, I'm willing to try this or that. And once you're ready, I think the most important thing is, you hear of all these brain retraining programs, and it's like these people at like retreats, and it's like, no, you don't have to become a monk. Like the trick is to baby step and to make tiny wins. Because if you just give yourself a win, even if it's for 30 seconds, that win is going to propagate a positive association with what you just did. And then it's just going to get easier and easier and easier. Now, it's not easy, but that's just the phenomena of how one can do it, is that you got to make it tiny. You got to make the wins tiny and just roll with it.
Yeah. So what are some tiny wins when it comes to calming down your nervous system? What are some really small things we can do?
I think the easiest thing is when you are in a stressed moment or a panicked moment, to just notice that you are, and that's it. And just be like, sweet, good job, Jenna. Good job, Jill. You just noticed it. Don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to reverse it. There's nothing more that's required of you. You just noticed it. Good job. And that's that's how I start with people.
Yeah, it's like taking away the pressure a little bit too. Like I think something just to add is like with myself, and I know Jill does this too, is like, as you know, I was on anti-anxiety meds for a very long time. Like I have had my fair share of panic attacks and anxiousness. And I think the problem what happened with me is I looked at it as like really bad, right? Like I wanted to change it so badly, or I was very ashamed of it. And kind of like, as you kind of are saying, is like practicing this element of just like, what is it? Like indifference or like stoicism or something, like just basically saying to myself, like, and this has helped me. So I'm glad that you're saying this, is like not putting so much power to that thought or that experience. And I've tried to tell Jill that too.
Yeah. So a lot of people think I need to change my brain. How the F am I going to do that? Like, how am
Yeah.
I going to like it sounds like an impossible feat. It sounds like an active feat, but actually it's more of a process of letting go, which has more of a passive texture to it. And then it's like, okay, well, how I still can't do that. How can I let things go? Well, the first thing is to just notice. And that's why I just give people that first step of noticing. And then once they notice, if they can reframe or talk to themselves as if their best friend is having your experience, how you would talk to them, because then it's not them doing it to themselves. It's them doing it because people don't care about themselves as much as they do someone else they love, generally when they, in these moments. And then that's the next step. And like, you did that. Perfect. And then you get some good feeling from it. And you already are letting go just by doing that. And so it's more or less of I need to change me, or I need to become Batman or like whatever superhero where I'm now invincible. And it's more just about doing these tiny steps that involve noticing, observing, having compassion for yourself. And that's the letting go part.
One last thing I want to say about stress. I was a college softball player. And so I lived probably for 15 years under constant stress. But more than that, I believed that being able to live under constant stress was like a superpower, like it was a flex of some sort. And what I didn't realize was that all my gut issues that were building and getting worse were really built from that stress. Can you speak to, within your practice, how you see stress impact people's actual health, not just their mental health?
Yeah. I mean, one of the most typical signs is gut issues, chronic pain, and I'd say headaches are probably the three most common, just because with chronic stress, chronic stress does a couple of things. One is that it elevates your cortisol levels, and cortisol is something that's supposed to come and go up and down, and it's naturally anti-inflammatory. But when it stays high, persistent, and longer, it actually has an inflammatory effect and a catabolic effect, meaning breaking down. So we're not rebuilding and healing. We are breaking things down. And when we break things down, we are causing oxidative reactive species, which is byproducts that result in inflammation. And for some people, this can be headaches or brain fog, and some people can be chronic pain. Some people can be gut issues. And the second part being that through chronic stress, we are escalating our sympathetic nervous system, down regulating our parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. And those that have been self create certain processes that result in inflammation or neural hypersensitization, which is a lot where IBS type things come in, where it may not be necessarily inflammation issue, but now it's a neurological hypersensitization issue. So I don't know if I went way too deep on that, but basically, chronic stress has so many different avenues and how it can manifest physiologically. And a lot of it is just, you're saying how like, oh yeah, like I was a badass, I was playing softball, like I can handle it all. Our culture, our society is gearing us to live under chronic stress because we're told, the Wall Street guy, I used to work on Wall Street before I got sick, that was, like you're going to be at the top of the food chain. You're going to just, life is going to be awesome. And I see this a lot in women, especially because, women are more prone to things like IBS or PCOS or kind of more these things. And it's like, well, if we go way back in the day, women weren't hustling like, 12-hour straight days like maybe men were when they were going to war, for example. So I don't know that women are biologically meant to live the life that this 21st century is telling you guys to do. And I think it's resulting in some of these issues. So a lot of different ways to go there.
I think about that all the time because I'm sure this probably pisses off some feminists or something like that. But the first day of our period is you feel depleted and you have to mentally go to war with yourself in order to like really accomplish any sort of day. And a lot of people don't have the luxury of saying, well, I'm going to take the day off or I'm going to lay in bed the way I want to feel because I actually have to go and live the life that I promised everyone else I was going to live. And probably almost every month I have the same thought of like, I really don't know our bodies were built for this. Like I really believe that at the beginning of time, we were meant to really follow this cycle. And unfortunately, today's world, like if you have a big presentation or, in softball in college, if you have the run test first day of your period, good luck because you've got about 80% of your energy. You've got about, you're more likely to get hurt. There were a lot of studies when I was at UNC Chapel Hill, there were a lot of studies being done on ACL tears and where women or girls were in their cycle. And this is so off topic, but I thought it was so important because your body actually is weaker during certain parts of your cycle. And if you're pushing a woman during that time, the body's physically weaker. So I agree, but I think, a lot of people listening are probably like, well, sorry, I have to go to work regardless if I'm on day 1 or day 14. And I think our mindset and your mindset too is like, life is life. So let's figure out the best ways to support it during that period. Would you recommend for the really stressed out people who are struggling with IBS and constipation and things we'll get into in a second, breath work, meditation, like what's the best way to like find a quick way to calm down?
Yeah. And it's going to be different for everyone. If you can find a space that calms you down, for me, it's my car. So even if I'm at home and I'm stressed out, I'll just go to my car because I feel insulated, kind of like my own little cubby. And so if you have a space like that, and if you're at work, you can find one wherever it is, and you just go there to hang out by yourself for 60 seconds. I think that will do a lot. When I was in chiropractic school, there was one random room I would just go hide in. Probably if someone was walking by, like, what the heck is going on here? But, we all have, these places because it's all about safety. When we're panicking and we're stressed out, we don't feel safe. And so we need to introduce safety, whatever that is. And if it's some place where you feel like you're not seen, if it's someone that you can just say, hey, when I text you, can you just text me back because you make me feel safe, something like that. And then, of course, on the chemistry side of things, now that's not doing like, the meditation, like, that's just intraday, whatever you need to do. If it's journaling, whatever it is that makes you locked in and feel safe. And then obviously on the chemistry side of things, adrenal support, magnesium, things like that, certain things, GABA, You want to make sure that your liver is detoxifying, just because if it's backed up, that's going to decrease GABA production, all kinds of things. So that's why that's why the whole chemistry side is so important. They really go hand in hand.
I want to get into detoxification in a second, but I think let's start kind of with the root. So root cause is a term that's often thrown around, and I think a lot of people don't understand it, right? Because we all think that we need to go and take supplements and like do all supplements are huge, right? Because they're like we're in like $1 billion supplement industry now. That's one piece of the puzzle. So when you're being told that, I take this supplement and all of this went away, we're seeing it every day now with the rise in social media, marketing, whatever it is. When you hear the term root cause, or when you try to explain to your patients, we really need to get to the root of these issues instead of just putting on a Band-Aid or just having you take a supplement, which, side note, I do like supplements. Like you said, supplementing with magnesium, things like that can be super helpful. But when you're talking root cause, I know it's different for everyone. How would you explain that to our community as to what it is or how we can kind of uncover it?
If I had to use one word, it's inflammation. Now, obviously, it's stuff, there's things that cause inflammation, but then it gets all messier and bigger. So think of it as the number one goal is reducing inflammation, because inflammation is what causes epigenetic gene expression. And it's also what causes autoimmunity. And it's also what causes neural hypersensitivity. Inflammation is at the genesis of the heavy majority of chronic illnesses that are acquired, meaning you're not born with. So what causes inflammation? Well, that is your environment. What's your environment? That is the food that you're around, the toxins that you're exposed to, and the infections that you're exposed to. And so that's why detoxing is so important, because you want to decrease the load. We're naturally detoxing. I don't want people to think like, oh my gosh, I'm not detoxing, I need to take these things. No, we're always detoxing. Our liver, our kidneys, our lymph, our large intestine, we are naturally detoxifying creatures. But the load that in modern society that we're exposed to is unlike it ever before. And so sometimes we do need a little bit of assistance in order to keep the load down so that inflammation doesn't occur and then all these triggers occur. So essentially it's inflammation, and inflammation is caused by emotions and chemical exposure, with chemical exposure being foods, toxins, and infections.
Okay, so let's go into detoxification. You kind of said, we're always detoxing, but I think we're moving toward this place in which I think people are starting to realize that you don't just go and juice cleanse and do all those fancy, expensive things that people were doing for so long, in the, 2000s, whatever time range it was. Still happening now, but
like the detox teas and
like the detox teas and all that stuff. I think we're moving away from that. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but it seems that we are. Okay, so how you said you can detox different ways, but how would you explain detoxification in your own words?
Well, detoxifying is mostly your already existing organs, like your liver and gallbladder and lymph and kidneys, doing their job to filter and break down toxins that we're exposed to, including hormones and including infections. The liver is just so important. And really, it's the liver that is probably most involved or most in need of added aid from these supplements and things like that. With detoxification, I mean, you could, just be detoxifying all the time, but then that's not so good either, because you can get nutritional deficiencies. You can get dysbiosis just from over detoxification. And so I think there's a good reason why these teas and cleanses came up, but really it's something that we should be doing all the time in one way or another, rotating through different ways of doing it so that we don't create an environment where certain infections are perhaps used to a certain consistent herb that we're taking all the time, because they can get used to those things, just like medications. So really cycling through, kind of keeping your body surprised, kind of like, it's like playing with a cat with a string, it's like, that's what I think of detoxification. It's like, you never want to give it the string, but you want to keep it swiping. And so that's pretty much, moving through all these different things and not getting your body just like, all right, I know what you're doing. Now I'm going to create the kind of environment that I need to grow this yeast or grow this, fungus, whatever. So I don't know if I answered your question directly.
No, you did. And just for our audience, when you say like exposed to infections, can you just explain infections real quick?
Yeah, infections are everywhere. It's not to scare people. It's just we live in a world where, viruses, there's trillions of viruses. There's they don't even know how many parasites there are, thousands to hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And so, and you were talking about the fear mongering earlier. Everyone needs to just know, like, we live amongst these folks. They're, our roommates.
Hell yeah.
And
right.
It's just about being strong enough to, withstand them. And that's pretty much it. So even food that you eat, your stomach acid is the first kind of antibacterial element or something that's going to kind of break down the initial bacteria and infections that are on the food. And there's a lot of aspects of your body that's going to be part of that. And that's just normal. And sometimes you need a little bit of help, but certainly living in fear is not the way to go about it. And I see a lot of sort of these crunchy moms. I've learned recently what crunchy meant. I think I'm late to the game on this. I figure
you are.
Yeah, like, okay. I've been seeing crunchy. I'm like, what's this crunch? And then I learned it was about granola, do you guys know that?
Granola people.
Yeah. Granola people. I see a lot of them you could argue, are creating their own illnesses off of the fear of not doing enough. And so that's why I'm like, yo, we're living with these creatures, just take it easy.
So to be clear, if you are fear mongering and you are so afraid of everything, every illness, every toxin, you're making yourself sick.
100%. 100%. I mean, I can't say like what you have is being caused by this, but you are not doing yourself any favor. You are contributing to a physiological process that induces illness or induces symptoms, for sure. It all comes down to feeling safe.
Yeah. When you said that you're so grateful that, or like, I don't know, I'm being like trying to be humble, but when you shouted us out and basically said that we are not fear mongers, that is like truly the biggest compliment for me, because 4 or 5 years ago when I started my health journey, I 100% developed orthorexia because I was so sick at a point, like so constipated, so felt like shit, that I felt like I had to go, like, if it was not, like, I had to go, it was 0 100, right? So I went 100, and I ended up thinking, like, I was scared to put certain things in my mouth. Like, I was scared to put certain foods, no seed oils, no this, no that. And I drove myself freaking crazy. And so I'm so pro, like, also living your life, because I saw what that actually did to my nervous system and to my body. So I would just like to note that, because again, that's like, I want everyone listening to this to know, Jill and I like to say knowledge is power. Like, once you know better, you can do better. But there's a certain level to that, right? Like, you don't get obsessive. You just know to allow yourself to make whatever informed decision you want to make.
When talking about detoxing, can we create a little detox checklist of the ways you should be detoxing and the ways that you could be detoxing?
All right, let's start at the mouth. When you're chewing, you're producing amylase. That's the first enzyme that breaks things down. Probably okay with that. You want to make sure you have enough stomach acid. I think that's probably going down the GI tract. That's one of the first shortcomings that can lead to dysbiosis or an infections downstream. Almost everyone I know who has dysbiosis or SIBO or even gallbladder issues isn't producing enough stomach acid, because the production of stomach acid is what initiates the creation of or initiates the gallbladder to release bile. And the creation of stomach acid is what breaks down the food and triggers the opening of the gastro the valve from the stomach to the small intestine. So it's what keeps things moving. When you're not producing enough stomach acid, the GI tract slows down. And when the GI tract slows down, that's when you get overgrowth. So stomach acid is huge. Producing enough digestive enzymes, those come from your small intestine and your pancreas. They're involved in breaking down complex carbs and proteins and just smaller particles for digestion or absorption, which occurs in your small intestine. Making sure that this is super important, making sure that your liver and gallbladder aren't congested. And this is why I mentioned earlier that the liver is just so important because it just has a big task. It's just asked to do a lot. It's like the president of your, gut organs. Like it's
The
got
liver?
the liver.
Okay.
It's got,
I
it's got,
love that.
yeah, it's got to create the bile, which your gallbladder stores. Like your gallbladder is like, the secretary of bile release, but your liver is making it. And your liver is what has to break down your hormones into there's certain enzymes that are used to break it down so you can actually excrete it. There's a lot of women with estrogen dominance. Maybe they're on birth control, and that's because the liver isn't sufficiently breaking down estrogen. And so then it gets reabsorbed and they become estrogen dominant. So the liver's in charge of that. It's in charge of heavy metals that move through your system. It's just in charge of so much of the detoxification. So liver is, and that's why people get fatty liver, is if people aren't detoxifying enough, the liver has no choice but to kind of store it in its own tissues. And then that creates inflammation. And then it creates fat cells in order to store these toxins, which is why people get fatty liver. So you're keeping your liver healthy. To me, it's like your brain, your heart, and your liver. Super huge. Gallbladders, really important. Obviously, that's what releases the bile, which is what emulsifies and breaks down fats. So you don't want that to be clogged up. Bile also stimulates motility. So people who are constipated might have a congested gallbladder, which can lead to gallstones. So gallbladder is huge. It's probably one of the biggest missing components that I see in constipation that is unaddressed. Your bladder and kidneys are huge. A lot of the flora in your bladder comes from your gut. So it's not all too unusual. I see people with IBS. They also have interstitial cystitis, or they pee a lot during the day, or they have issues, with urination. And your kidneys obviously filters toxins out of your urine. And so, when now you're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I gonna, this is impossible. That's a lot. It's like, no, it's
Yeah.
not. They're already working. They're already
Okay.
working. And all you got to do is just throw it a little bit of help every now and then, just to kind of give it just because we're overwhelmed with our roommates, right? And so we need to just give it a little bit of assist, a little bit of boost. And that's it. You're good. And if you become symptomatic, figure out what's going on.
So I hear all that and I hear, like, how would I even know which one to support? Like, am I supporting the president, the liver? Do I support the secretary? Like, how do I know even where to begin in all of that support? Because I thought you were going to say like sweating, pooping, and you took it another route, which is great. But how do I do something from that?
Well, those two, sweating and pooping too. I mean, yeah, it goes on. I mean, pooping is a must because, it's got to come out. But how would you know? Well, that's where if they are overwhelmed, they see someone like yourselves, or they see someone like me who can maybe become more finite. Because if you do just try to take every supplement in the book, yeah, it might do good for you, but we only are able to utilize so much of what we put in our mouths, so, we want, everything's going to be competing for ATP, for energy, to actually utilize what we put in there. So if you can figure out exactly what organs need support, that would be ideal. But on the flip side, if you just want to take generic stuff that just kind of covers all your bases, you can do that.
Yeah, I want to go into the liver because I think the liver's helpful, and I think a lot of people need liver support, right? You're saying that like these days our bodies are not meant to keep up with the stress and the toxin load and the infections and everything that's coming our way. And what takes the hit is our largest filtration system, and that's the liver, right? Or organ. And so when we're talking liver, how can we support the liver? Because we haven't talked a lot about the liver and bile, which again, to everyone listening, like, don't be freaked out and think you don't need to know all the science behind all of this. You just need to know that we need to start supporting it. And there's certain ways that we can support it. And I'd love you to go into just a few examples like fiber and like stress management, things like that.
Wait. Before we do that though, for those that don't really know, like me, how do we even know that we need bile support? What are some of the signs?
Yep.
If you have constipation, if you have reflux, now it may not be from your gallbladder, but it certainly could be. If you are gaining a lot of weight, if you are just feeling super lethargic and sluggish, certainly if your poop is floating and is oily, yeah, those are probably the main ones that kind of hit the reason why it's so missed is because it's not so obvious, the gallbladder. It's kind of like, it's tucked under the liver. It's trying not to be noticed. And that's kind of, how it works when people express symptoms is it's not so obvious that it's the gallbladder, but I just toss it in there all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So what are ways that we can then support that element? If someone's like, okay, I'm constipated, I'm gaining weight, I have these X, Y, and Z issues, like, what are things I can start doing now if I don't want to go and see someone and go through all of that?
Yeah. So obviously diet, eliminating or reducing as much as you can, sugar and processed foods, anything, again, those things create inflammation. And remember, inflammation, if there's anything that someone has to take away from this, like they don't remember conversations, they only remember words, inflammation, like that's the key thing to take away. And so processed foods and sugar is going to be huge. Adding leafy greens like broccoli, which has sulforaphane, artichoke, kale, if you can digest it. Those are the kind of things that are going to assist the liver in sort of moving things along. If you want to take a supplement, you could take milk thistle. You can take an herb called Schisandra, which sounds like
That
a
sounds like
beautiful
my
woman.
grandma.
Yep. Oh, I think it sounds like a beautiful woman whenever I hear it. I
No,
think of
yeah.
like a Greek goddess.
No, I guess it sounds like someone who would be like named in like the 1930s. It's like too elegant.
Yeah.
It's too elegant for
It is
2025.
elegant.
Yeah.
So elegant. Yeah. That's awesome. And acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione. Schisandra actually produces glutathione, but it's just an herb. So then there's NAC and acetylcysteine, and then obviously glutathione. I try not to give people glutathione because I want their body to actually make it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I usually start with things like milk thistle, Spanish black radish, and Schisandra because they're all herbs, and I want to give as much food as I can, possibly, as opposed to synthetic end elements. NAC is kind of in between, and then certainly glutathione is an end product because I want the person's body to not get lazy. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I'm glad we're talking about this because I think it's details. Oh, hi, Duke. I heard him bark.
Well,
Side note.
if you're watching online or if you're not watching online, Duke just joined the podcast because he's been growling at the door for like 10 minutes and I've been secretly trying to wave him our way for a little while. So we now have a third co-host. This is going to be a really funny.
Duke.
Oh, thank
Duke,
you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Jill went to Duke. That's why.
Oh,
but it also gives elegance, I hope, because
Yeah,
that's
it
what I
is.
was going for. I just wanted,
royal.
like, why not name your dog something that's like super fancy,
Our friend's dog's name is Lady, and they live in the same building as us. So whenever we're like walking together, anyone's like, or when someone's like, "What's their names?" It's like Duke and Lady. We're like, okay, we're like not
Wow.
trying to be better than you, but
Yeah.
We are, but we are.
but we are.
Yeah. No, flee peasant. Yeah, no,
Right.
that's so funny.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm glad you're talking about the liver because I think the liver needs extra love. Like that's just what we're establishing. And that's, obviously I know that and I see that a lot too, but I think it's important to hear it from you, our guest, and just to make people aware that we can add more love to our liver, especially if you're or gallbladder, especially if you're dealing with symptoms like you mentioned. I do because I think this conversation's going more into like root cause and like nervous system and how we really support our detoxification pathways and whatnot. I would honestly like you to talk a little bit more about the nervous system because I think we would be missing out, especially as it is part of your story. I see over and over again, like I mentioned, and I'll just do a side note. I want you to talk about this, but I'm sure you see this with your patients, my clients. Sometimes I have difficulty, and this is just being completely honest, because I genuinely do think that people need to hear things multiple times in order for it to hit them. But if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, a light bulb is going off because they've heard the beginning of our conversation, they're like, I actually think I am that person who needs somehow to, control my stress or decrease it. Or Jill one time said to me, like, how do we decrease our stress? Because when people hear that word, they get kind of pissed off because they're like, I don't even know what I need to be doing. You gave some tips like finding like, a safe space or a safe person. But if someone wants to go a little bit deeper into the work or they're getting that light bulb that's going off that's saying like, listen, I think that this has been causing my issues for years. How do you approach healing and nurturing one's nervous system to get back into that rest and digest state as much as possible?
So there's brain retraining programs out there. I'm sure maybe you've heard of them. One is Dynamic Neural Retraining System, DNRS. Then there's the Gupta program. I think there's something ANS. It's ANS Rewire, Autonomic Nervous System Rewire. It's another one. And all of those come with, or Joe Dispenza, all of those come with basically recognizing your triggers, which is kind of the first step that we talked about, recognizing it. But in the moment, going through a process of reorienting your perspective on what exactly is going on, having compassion for yourself, it's huge. If you don't have compassion for yourself, it's not going to work. So, I'm still working on that part. Just having compassion for yourself is, some people don't need to do any of the actual steps. When they just have compassion for themselves, that works a lot too. But going through those kinds of programs, they will have daily meditations, journaling, affirmations. But a lot of it is catching the moment that you are stressed or triggered, reorienting, observing it from like a camera from up above, seeing it from a third party perspective, talking to yourself like you would talk to your friend, congratulate yourself for, doing this. Like Dr. Max, I think that's so awesome that you're taking this moment. I love you. Like, keep doing it. And then, reorienting what you want your experience to be like. So envisioning that you're just going to the bathroom as in a normal day and actually feeling what that's like, because it's the feeling that creates the biochemical processes. And so we want to create the association of the feeling, the thought process, and the biochemistry that results downstream. And so that's where these kind of practices come in.
I'll say that as someone who didn't believe in all of that a few years ago, who would have listened to you and said, he is so woo-woo and so out of touch with reality because that's just not realistic. I just want to say that at some point you'll swallow the pill and you'll accept that maybe you need a tiny bit of woo-woo in your life, or maybe you just need to look at it as stress is in a way for our body poison. And that's as fear-mongering as I'll probably ever sound, but it's true. Like, every time you commit to being stressed out and being okay with being stressed out is just you allowing your body to stay in whatever sickness you're staying in. Duke is one of those people that doesn't believe in being.
Yeah, what is wrong with him?
He just can't get Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
And he can't even hear the conversation. But I just always like to throw those things in there because I think we have a lot of listeners who gear more towards Jenna, who has, been ahead of her time for a while. But then we also have a lot of people that listen that are more of my mindset, where we've had to learn the hard way, like Duke, and we've had to really accept the hard truth that like maybe our stress really is putting us back, or maybe meditation isn't only for crunchy yoga people and that we can all really benefit from it. So I really love your message. And I think what you're saying is, whether we want to hear it or not, is the reality. And so the quicker people who enjoy being stressed out or who have been denying that that's a part of their health journey can accept that, I think the healthier we'll all be,
And I think the
including
first thing
Duke.
is be like, yeah, I'm stressed. Cool. You know,
Mhm.
it's okay that that's part of what causes illness. You know, the more you lessen the weight of anything, the less it is to just accept it. You know.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm going into a new job in a week, and it's a job with a lot of responsibility. And it years ago probably would have really stressed me out. I think I would have just gotten anxiety probably starting now if I didn't already have it. And I saw on TikTok a few weeks ago, someone was like, no matter what you're doing, just remember it's literally a job, unless you're a police officer or a surgeon and you're literally responsible for the safety and the health of other people. And then therefore you guys need to figure it out on your own, because I don't know what to tell you. But like for us that are just in corporate America, it is just a job, and you need to work hard at your job and you need to try your best at your job. But at the end of the day, it is just a job, and don't let it give you anxiety 2 weeks before you start, and don't let it ruin your world, because believe in yourself, like be good at what you do, but then leave it, because that's not life. And I was like, my algorithm is a little too like dead on what I need to hear. Like TikTok's inside my brain figuring out my algorithm at this point. But it's sometimes it's really hard to take yourself back, like you said a few minutes ago, and like look from a different vantage point and like watch the way you're actually acting day to day. And like, do you align with the way you're running your life, or are you like, holy shit, like now that I see it from literally any other person's perspective, what I'm doing is kind of nuts.
Something that's going on right now that is very popular that I've seen you talk about too is histamine intolerance in issues and mast cell activation syndrome. And I want to add this in at the end because I think it's buzzy these days.
It's like the
Lots of
new
things have been
cortisol.
buzzy. Yeah, it's the new cortisol. We have a short time to cover this, but can you briefly explain maybe what these two are to start?
Yeah, for sure. So we all produce histamine to some extent. Histamine is produced if you just have seasonal allergies, for example. Um, but histamine can become um, overly produced, if you have certain root causes that contribute to the production of histamine. And this can be gut infections like SIBO, parasites, mold, poor liver detox, which we talked about earlier, nervous system dysregulation, sort of being in that fight or flight, and hormonal imbalance like estrogen dominance, which we kind of touched on earlier, that can also contribute to histamine production. And basically, there's these cells called mast cells, and these root causes trigger these mast cells to release histamine. And so that's what mast cell activation syndrome is. It's just the name histamine intolerance put into a diagnosis code, I guess. And because it is the mast cells that release histamine. And so how to address it is addressing the root cause issues that contribute to histamine production, and breaking down the histamine, which is the detoxification element of it. So histamine is one of those things that isn't actually a root cause issue. It is sort of in the middle of the you know the pathway and the order of things, and that there's something that's causing histamine production, and then it's the histamine load that you have that creates the symptoms.
I've seen a lot of advice on the internet, and I want you to kind of falsify it or not. Is okay. So if you have histamine issues, what you need to do is remove histamine inducing foods or histamine rich foods or things that are going to essentially like why am I blanking on the word, not enact it, but like is going to affect your body. Like if you're eating something that's high in histamine and you have histamine issues, that you should stay away from it completely. Is that how you fix these issues? I'm asking as a consumer,
Yeah.
or do we need to get to the root cause again with things like that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, pretty soon we'll just morph back into our fetus self because there's just too many root
Right.
cause.
Yeah,
You know what I
seriously.
mean? Like it's just never
Yeah.
just goes. We'll just become unicellular, organisms
Right.
again. Um, Obviously, there's foods that trigger histamine release, like aged cheeses, dairy, fermented foods, alcohol, smoked meats, certain seafood. But again, you were able to once eat those things and not create mast cell activation. So really getting to the triggers of what is causing immune dysregulation, that's going to be the key. And what causes immune dysregulation? That's the mold, that's the infections, and that's the chronic stress or nervous system dysregulation.
Is it fair to say that if you are reactive to, and like you guys can go and look up the histamine rich foods and things that are more of those triggers, but is it fair to say that those who have issues with histamine have one of those underlying root causes? Like if you have all those symptoms, if you feel, and will you go over the symptoms real quick just so everyone knows?
Yeah, you can have rashes. So rashes are super typical, like eczema, hives, brain fog is pretty big. Anxiety, panic is pretty big. Even digestive issues, because there's two receptors, histamine receptors, and one of them causes GI issues, and that's where if you heard of the supplement DAO, that's where that kind of comes in. But then there's the histamine receptor that causes sort of all the other ones, which is the skin issues and brain fog. And so, sorry, what was your question again? I just totally blanked out.
No, sorry. I wanted you to go over the symptoms, so thank
Oh,
you for that.
yeah.
But my biggest question is like, okay, if I'm like that person, I'm connecting the dots. I'm getting those symptoms. I feel weird when I have X, Y, and Z histamine rich foods or inducing foods. Is it safe to say that maybe they have an infection, virus, mold issue that is underlying cause
Right,
of
right.
said issue?
Yeah, unless it's a true allergy, like a peanut
Okay.
allergy, an IgE allergy,
Hmm.
there's some sort of underlying acquired trigger that it's going to be one of those things. Now, I mean, the trick with this kind of stuff is that these triggers result in epigenetic change or signaling that can persist even when these triggers are addressed. And so you almost have to quiet things down even quieter to where they were before this even started. And that's the challenge with a lot of this stuff. And again, that's why it's so important to do the emotional side of things, because there's nothing as constant of a signal as your emotional state, your belief system. So the answer is yes, that there often is something that's a trigger that is chemical, that you acquired, and that's got to be addressed. And then taking things and doing things that are just going to calm down the nervous system independent of that chemical trigger.
Yeah, and okay, I love that. And again, here we go, back to the nervous system, back to emotions. Again, like as someone who I just want, I'm almost kind of just going off of your take to say that it's proven through the changes that I personally have made. And I know Jill is working toward making, of like changing our environment, our mindset, our relationship, who we're with, has made such an insane transformation in our health. And I'm going to start talking about it more myself. But I love, love, love the message that you're spreading. And honestly, we need more people like you who are just like sharing that part. And I know that that's such a part of your story. And honestly, thank you for being vulnerable with our community by sharing it, because I don't think enough people have recognized it. And I want to talk about it more on the podcast. So again, just very grateful that you are spreading that message and that you're sharing that, because Lord knows we need more people like you on this earth and in this space to be talking about it. So, yeah, it's exciting to hear it on our podcast, and we're definitely going to be going over it more in the future. Yeah, Jill, anything else to add?
No, well, one, thank you for the compliments. This has been such a fun
Yeah.
hour of our time. But no, just kidding. I think for someone up, there's Duke, for someone who has always struggled to accept the fact that nervous system regulation is key, we'd even really talk about this, but I had IBS for a decade, right? It's no shocker that a lot of that was due to my stress and not being able to regulate my nervous system. And I thought we were going to talk a lot more about IBS and constipation today, but I think the reality is whether you have constipation or IBS or Crohn's or any other issue that you're battling, if you are not simultaneously at least attacking how to regulate your nervous system, you're missing out a huge part of healing. So that's the message I took from you today. And I hope at least someone else does the same. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Remember, it's just inflammation. What causes inflammation? Stress, mindset, and your exposures. And that's pretty much, and that stress part is just, it's so enormous, and yeah, it's overlooked. And I need to talk about it more too. So I'm glad that we did talk about it.
Yeah. Reminder for you. Yeah. I am, so grateful that we had you on. And if you can share with us your Instagram, TikTok, and where people can find you, maybe if they want to work with you or they want to learn more about you.
Yeah. So my website is www.drmaxd.com. And my handle for Instagram and TikTok is at Dr. Max Digests, Dr. Max Digests. And I post as much as I can, so you can find me there.
Incredible.
Yeah, and we'll put, of course, everything in the show notes for you guys.